Mute.
Yeah, so I know a number of you actually on here too, but for those who you don't know me, I'm John Plishka. I'm a pastel artist, really mostly probably 95% pastel, though I honestly haven't picked up some pastels in a month or two. I've actually been working in some oils for the first time in a long time. Um, but hopefully, like riding a bike, it's kind of been my favorite medium ever since I've been in junior high. Honestly, I like being able to kind of kind of blend colors a lot, and especially kind of with my hands. I've always wanted to do sculpture. I never have. So this is the next closest thing is I can kind of sculpt the colors a little bit with my hands. And I kind of really enjoy that. Um, I, uh, I belong to a number of different professional organizations, the Society of Animal Artists, the American Academy of Equine Art, the International Association of Pastel Societies. I'm a Master's Circle member in that, which I don't know what that means, but it means you just get into a certain amount of shows, and then they try to give you a little certification there. But anyway, so again, it's my preferred medium, and I kind of really like to do it. Like I think the ease of I like how it's kind of spontaneous and you can a lot of different ways to work with them. Some other ways I don't do some of these ways, but like sometimes people will do like an underpainting. They'll put pastels and spray like alcohol on it. You can use with some of the papers, which we'll get to in a second. You can do a watercolor underpainting and paint pastels on top of that. And so far as the equipment, for those of you who haven't really done a lot of pastels, they're really fun to try, but they can be kind of frustrating because there's a ton of different um, materials out there. You know, the student grade stuff is just that. It's good. It's for learning. It's not really meant for really, professional pieces that you might try to sell or things like that. Probably the most important piece of material that you can use is your paper. Okay, so the paper that is used often has kind of a surface that has something called tooth in it. And tooth, again, is basically little tiny, almost like little microscopic bumps that will actually hold the pastel pigment. Okay, basically oil paints are basically almost like pastel pigment with added oils. Okay, so you're just kind of using the straight pigment. You're not adding any sort of things like oils or water to it or anything else unless you kind of wanted to. But the paper I use is something called Pastel Mat. It's one word, PASTELMAT. And I like it for a couple different reasons. It almost has the texture of like uh, almost like watercolor paper a little bit. It's kind of got some of that thickness to it. Its actual surface is like this cellulose kind of archival bonding surface. And surprisingly, it takes a ton of actual pigment layers. So it's not like, something where you lay down one pigment color and you're stuck with that. You actually can press harder and basically compact the lower layers, and then your new pigment will show up on top. Okay. So it's almost like oil paints in that sense that you can almost paint over your existing marks that you make up to a point. Okay. And after a point, you can fill all the tooth with pigment, and then anything you add almost like falls off. It really doesn't stick to the paper anymore. And then the pastel dust and the pigment can actually fall from the surface. So that's my favorite surface. A ton of people like something called UART. UART is another one. They have various surface things from like 200 to like 800 is like UART 200, UART 800. 200 is very thick and it's almost like sandpaper and it's very abrasive. And if you actually like to, has two problems with it that I don't like is one, is it's good for people to make big thick marks, and then they leave them without a lot of blending. But if you, it eats up your pastels significantly. Like you can go through a stick of pastels in no time using that stuff. And the other thing is it can actually, if you blend with your fingers, it'll actually start to sand your fingertips. off a little bit, which isn't very much fun. So by the time it's fine for some people swear by it. Other people, by the time you get up to like the 700 or 800, it's very similar to this pastel mat. It's got a smoother surface that does take some pigment, and actually, is not that bad of a paper. Um, there's a gazillion different types of ones. If any of you aren't sure, which ones you buy, or you may have some that somebody gave you, just send me an email. I'll be happy to kind of talk to you about it. That goes for any questions about today as well. If I don't answer anything, just send me an email, let me know, or friend me on Facebook and message me. That's another, thing to do. I know a number of you are friends with me on Facebook as well. And I'm always more than happy to kind of help you out, even if it's helping you with a painting. You're stuck on something, let me know. I'm happy to help with that as well. So the paper is kind of the number one thing. Then your next step, for me, I usually, for smaller pieces, I'll attach it to something hard. This is like a masonite backboard. It's actually a piece of masonite where the front surface is gessoed for oil painting, but I screwed up the oil painting on the front side, and now I just use the back. I know I can paint over it, but I'm just going to use I use the back surface of it here as a nice firm. It's almost like a clipboard type of feel to it, and then I tape it down. The next thing is your actual pastels themselves. There's so many different brands, and it gets, again, kind of frustrating. I like one called Unison, and it's spelled Unison. Unisons have whoops, let me get to the camera. Here we go. It's harder to think about. Unisons are actually a very velvety, kind of buttery texture. They're very easy to blend. The difference between these and some of the other brands, like the other one I have that I'll sometimes use, is Rembrandt. And these are more, they almost look like crayons, and their consistency is a little bit more waxy. They tend not to blend as easily, but they're also good. And they come in obviously all sorts of different arrays of colors. They're expensive. Pastel, like a set of like 48 is going to run you almost $200. They do last a long time, though. I mean, I've been on my set here for a long period of time, probably 5 years or more. So it's worth the investment if you actually are serious about, doing this. And I think that's one big thing. A couple other things about the medium in general to kind of decide if you want to take that leap of faith or not in it, is framing. Okay. So I don't frame my pieces unless they're going into a show. And that's because of framing expense. It costs a lot to frame. If I ever get the time one of these days, I'll figure out how to frame myself for these. But they do need specialized framing. They often need spacers so that any loose dust won't, get on the inner surface of the glass. They need to be framed under glass. They can't be framed under acrylic, because acrylic, the static electricity in the acrylic will actually pull the pastel off the surface of the painting and make it cloudy. Okay, so that's again kind of a little weird kind of drawback on there potentially for that. They do make an archival museum grade acrylic, but again, these museum archival framing things are kind of expensive, and kind of the minimum, even for this is roughly an 8x10, would probably cost with the glass 150 with a cheap frame to 250, with an expensive frame. Super expensive. So you got to reflect that in your selling price, unfortunately, which can make a little bit of a difference, because you got
Yeah,
to
I just want to jump in real quick on the acrylic. I use the museum quality acrylic also. The thing you got to be aware of it is it scratches very easily.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
so
you
I
have
end
to
up
kind of
having
special,
someone cut new pieces for me. So
yeah, special ways to kind of clean it. There's special directions on how to clean it and things like that. And there's a little sticker that gets put on the back of your once it's framed, that tells the purchaser how to clean it for their own, use down the road. Okay. Um, Another topic that comes up a lot of times is fixative. Using fixatives, and fixatives are these sprays that you spray over your pastels so that the pastel doesn't come off. Okay. It's a kind of a controversial topic, but the vast majority of pastelists that I know don't use any fixatives, and I would try to avoid it. The problem is it it darkens your actual colors. And so the main way people use it is they may lay down a base layer of pigment and they'll spray it and then they'll add on top of that. But if you're using good quality paper and you work very thin, you don't apply a lot of pastels, you don't get a lot of dust, and then that way you don't actually then have to apply fixative anyway. So I would urge against that. If you hear about it, I see it all the time on pastel groups, and usually if I'm teaching, another class or something like that, people always ask about it, and I would say stay away from fixatives. It just kind of it takes away the luster and the beauty of the medium. It takes away that nice shine and glow that kind of pastels can actually have. Um, Okay, expense. Let's see here too. And so far as animal art goes, because that's an interesting topic too. I would, as much as you can, and again, a lot depends on how you serious you want to get about this. But I try to enter a lot of shows and stuff like that too, and a lot of them require that you take your own references. And this kind of goes, I guess, with any sort of art. If you it's okay to rely on reference photos, I think, if you're trying to teach yourself, something, you're just working for yourself, if you're giving it to friends or whatever. But if you're gonna kind of display it places, I would just kind of urge you to try to get in the habit of using your own references, whether it's plein air, and you're outside painting, that way, and you're in the experience of doing it. If you take your own references, and this wildlife artist Jan Martin McGuire. She lives in Tanzania and she's living the life. She actually got bit by a cobra on her thumb a year ago and almost lost her thumbnail. So she likes living the wild animal experience. It's a little bit too crazy for me living out in the bush, but she's got monkeys in her ceilings and all sorts of stuff like that. But the long and short of it is if you just kind of get to be one with your subject, I think it helps so much. And you saw what was going on. You were part of that experience when you took that photo. And it's kind of keeps that memory in mind. I see a lot of artists who are so good technically, but I see all they do is they copy photographers' photos. They get permission from the photographer, they copy it, and then they sell that image through a gallery. And to me, that's kind of like Jeff, I have the utmost photographer or respect for photographers. They should make their own own money on that. I don't know what their feeling is on selling the image and allowing people to use it, but I don't know if they're making money off your photo on a sale. I'd probably want a percentage of it. But anyway, I think if you get I've done a ton of paintings just in birds in my backyard, off of insects that have flown in my backyard, cicadas and fun stuff like that. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, just draw. It's like you drawing your flowers. If you're going to take pictures of flowers in the backyard or anything like that, take your own pics. I think you'll find yourself getting a kind of a neat connection with your actual art and a little bit
Yeah,
more of the soul of your subject of what you're actually painting.
yeah,
I think it gets portrayed a little bit better in your end product.
yeah. I think
Anybody have any
also
thoughts on
also
that? I don't know.
when you do your own photo, it I do it because I do photography and I want it just right, the image just right, what have you, and then I manipulate it. But if you're doing a pastel from it or anything, oil, acrylic, whatever, I don't think you need to have the best photograph in the world. If you've taken it, that's your reference, but you know, we all have the advantage of being able to manipulate the image a little bit as we paint it to get what we want out of it, get that feeling into it. So,
Yeah.
anyways, just my opinion.
No, yeah, I agree, and I think don't be a slave to any of your reference photos either. It's kind of interesting. I've seen people paint like reference photos that they've gotten from a photographer, and that they borrowed an image, and they're such a slave to it that they're actually doing sometimes, or maybe it's their own photo even too, but they're such a slave to it that they're doing a lot of things that aren't probably artistically very nice or very flattering for the subject. I've seen some with like their face full of flies, and they're actually painting the flies on the animal, which is, if you're portraying it as eating, some carcass out in the wild, that's one thing. But to kind of do a portrait of an animal with the flies on it, I think honestly kind of disrespects the animal in some regards. It's just my feelings again. It might be controversial, maybe not. I've also seen them painting pictures with certain diseases. It's kind of bizarre. I'm also a veterinarian. I've retired from practice, so I'm very lucky. I've had a lot of good training in anatomy and stuff like that. But I've seen them painting like cats with really, really dilated pupils. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, that cat's not healthy. That cat either has severely, severely high blood pressure and or is going blind, and that's why its pupils are so dilated. They may not even realize that. Maybe they haven't taken it to the vet. But if you're going to draw, like if someone came to me and they wanted me to do a commission on something like that, and I see that the pupils are really, really dilated, I would probably want to say to them, hey, this looks abnormal. Do you want me to do it this way or the way the animal was when it was healthy? you know, so again, don't be a slave to it. It's there just for reference. Again, I usually will go about 80% of the way done. Like I'll finish pretty much the painting, and then at the last 20%, I'll put away my reference photo and then just work on it as a painting. Okay. I'll take things away, I'll add things, I'll blur edges, I'll do whatever I can to make it look more like an actual painting than just me copying a photo. And again, that comes through, I think, in the long run. Um, let's see, what else do I want to talk about here? Just quickly before we actually start painting, I don't know, Jeff, how long you wanted to go. We're at a half an hour of kind of just blurbing and stuff here too. But I think process wise, how I approach the painting is I'll have my image. I usually will crop it and stuff on Photoshop. And I'm a fan of dramatic lighting. So I'll often like increase shadows and add highlights. And when you do that, you lose a little bit of color. So I'll usually up saturation a little bit, and that's it. I keep it really pretty simple. I tend to, when I crop, try to follow generally rule of thirds at least, or some other interesting type of composition that would get attention. Sometimes some things work better in the middle as a focal point. And then I'll divide my paper into thirds. And then I do like to, even for bigger paintings, this is an 8 by 10. Sometimes I would do stuff like you can transfer it with photo transfer paper, carbon paper on here. So if it's a darker colored one, you can buy white transfer paper and then transfer your image that you print out on a computer and get it right on here, which is kind of nice and simple, an easy way to do it. Personally, for myself, I don't get as much time as I'd like to draw. So I usually just make sure that to keep my drawing skills up, I'll just divide it into 9 squares instead of really, really tight grids. And I'll just draw out, approximate it out that way. And I feel it gives me a little more flexibility. And I actually then too kind of keeps my drawing skills a little bit higher up as well, or more tuned, I guess. And I actually probably have a unique thing. I know a lot of artists who start right in on the subject and then they'll paint everything around it. And I don't do that. And I think one of the interesting things that I do is I try to paint shapes. Okay. I actually look at the paper here not as a screech owl that I'm painting in a tree. I'm looking at it as a bunch of shapes that I need to render. And then hopefully in the end, all those shapes will give me one big picture. Okay. A lot of artists start, especially with animal art, they'll start at the animal's eyes, right? It's like the soul of the animal. It's one of the things they really like to do. And I don't do that. It's kind of interesting. I trust kind of the process. Probably the main reason I do this is because I'm right-handed and I work right to left, and pastels can smudge. So by doing it this way, kind of 1 square at a time, I'm preventing generally smudging as I'm going across. If I need to go back later, I'll get like a piece of glassine paper and then I'll just have my hand on it so I don't smudge it, and then go back and correct what I need. Or I'll flip the image upside down and work from it. And speaking of that, one last thing before I think I start here is how to kind of assess your painting as you're doing it. I'm a huge fan of the mirror trick, and I don't know how many of you know that, but when you're working, like, after pretty much every square or two, I'll take the painting to a mirror and just hold it up to a mirror and check it out. You see so much imperfections and problems that you have with the painting just by putting it in a mirror and flipping it, and your brain sees it differently when that happens. And there have been so many times where I think the painting's going along great, and I put it in the mirror, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, that totally doesn't look right. I got to fix that. It happens all the time. So I would highly urge you to kind of do that. And it checks yourself along the way to make sure like that everything's in proportion. Um, things like that, and that it's coming along well. The other way is to kind of check your values, and values are obviously, again, kind of your lights and darks on the painting. One of the ways you can kind of tell that's really simple is take your phone, take a picture of your art, okay, maybe halfway through or whatever, and then just put it into black and white mode, okay. Take a look at it and use one of your filters, the black and white filter, and your image hopefully should look really nice and clear in black and white. You should have, your deep contrasts, your darks should be darks, your lights should be light. And if not, then you might want to think about going darker in certain areas to add depth. I think the one thing that I see in a lot of people, a lot of times, is just the fear of going really, really dark. But dark gives you depth, and so do lights. And so, like, for this painting that we're going to end up doing, I'm going to save, the darkest darks for the thing that's farther. Whoops, the thing that's farthest back. I don't know if you can see it. Oh no, probably not. Jeff, could you switch views for a sec, maybe to me on there, if possible? There we go. Okay. Thanks. So the darkest darks that are going to be kind of back through here, and behind him, and as well as some of these deep crevices in the breaks in the wood. And then the whitest whites, I'm going to save for the things that are often clear, closest to me. So it's like these feathers, the tips of these feathers out coming out at me, and these ones that are kind of in direct sunlight. Okay. And even then, darkest dark blacks. I do use black. I know some artists don't, but I will try to add just a little touch of color in the black. It gives it a little bit more depth and life, because black can look really kind of flat. Okay. But I think using the black and white trick with the camera and looking at it in the mirror, um, again, are two huge, kind of simple, really simple little tips that will help your art out along the way. Any questions? If not, we can get going here. How's that sound? Finally, huh? Jeff, I am so sorry
Okay.
that the thing didn't work out with the doc cam today. We had it all set to go, and man, it was so frustrating. Um, so,
That's all
all right.
right.
So I don't know if you want to switch back to the thing here. And then how I like doing bark or wood, and I'll try to kind of move my hand a lot as best as I can for some of this. I like doing the cracks and big shapes in the wood first. Okay, it gives me an anchor point to kind of remember where I'm at. And it also, the key, I think, with doing like any sort of rough texture, or especially wood or anything, is picking up the highlights on it. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Picking out the highlights on it, and that really gives it a lot of depth to it. And even though the bark looks kind of gray and white normally, and if you, again, any of you want to see this, where I'm coming along with this, there we go. I'll just put it over like that. I mean, again, this isn't the best. I wish it was more on photo paper, but we're going to kind of do in these kind of sorts of areas first a little bit. And by the highlights, again, I mean like the edges of the bark here. If you highlight these with white, it really gives the bark a lot of texture. Okay. And I think that's something that'll hopefully help a little bit. So I'm looking off to my right here as I'm kind of doing this, and I'm taking my black pastel pencil. For a small one like this, I'll usually use a lot of pastel pencils. I'll probably use some of the actual sticks, the bigger pastel sticks in the back, and then just kind of. I don't want to be perfect in my wood, right? So I don't care. I don't want to get so detailed in all these sorts of, where are all the little bumps and everything like that. remember the wood isn't perfect and it's all eaten away and there's all sorts of little things. What I will kind of do is take little edges off to the side here. I don't know if you want to zoom in a little bit if you can on there or not. I don't know if that's something I can do or not. Probably not. But um, but I'll kind of go around all the way to like here. I'm going to kind of speed this up a little bit from what I normally would kind of try to do. And even though I'm working into my other quadrant, I'm getting kind of some of the base color that's kind of deep. So in within this black, there is actually a little bit of like a tan kind of a color. So I'm going to add just a little bit along the back edge here. And then I'm going to try to blend this a little bit. Um, and then I'll often take again the black pencil rather, and kind of color that back down a little bit. All right, so the next piece I'm going to do is kind of up to, let's see here, where's, this is about right through here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and then I'm going to work on this little corner area back through here, which corresponds to kind of this area right through here. And so this is kind of a shadow, and I love, probably like most of you, love like Payne's gray or some of these dark grays that have a little bit of purple in there for shadows. And so this color again is like a nice Payne's gray, and this is a dark gray. And so I'm going to go along the edge of this far part here. And just kind of again, since this does have some texture, this paper, I'm not going really thick on this. I'm just actually kind of trying to let and see some of the texture actually kind of come through a little bit. And so I don't know if you can kind of appreciate that a little bit or not. I've heard some pastels say you can't really mix the papers on colors on the paper, and I think you totally can. That's kind of my interpretation of that. I think it certainly is something where you absolutely can kind of layer the colors on top of each other. And then the next kind of color in this little band through the middle here, that's a little bit of it's also kind of a darker gray, but not as dark. So I'm going to go a little bit lighter with a kind of a light touch on here and kind of color kind of this in a little bit along the bottom here. Then I'll probably take again I think I'm going to take some of this dark gray and just gently kind of again leave it kind of a rough texture, not doing anything overly fancy here, and just kind of putting that down through here. Okay, so now a couple of different things. This is our first little kind of area of bark here. So looking at my little painting here to the picture, there are some areas here that are a little darker than the others. And so I'm going to kind of try to add in some black here again along the edge and kind of accent this kind of little piece of, um, of bark. Now, also from the reference photo, there's all these little areas along the bark here. You can't really see too well, but where it's kind of going kind of this way, okay, from here to here across. And so I'm adding in just a little bit of those. And then kind of the main thing from here is to start adding some of the texture here. Okay, so like I mentioned, you want to kind of start getting the edges of the bark a little bit. So I'm just adding a little bit of kind of some white kind of dots along through here, maybe a little bit over in through here. And then again, this is all kind of the edge. So the light it's important. I think as artists, one of the main things we have to realize is probably above all else, we are kind of gifted observers. Okay. We see the world, or we hopefully do anyway, in a different way. Okay. We're seeing it as like I don't know how many of you, if you're looking all of a sudden in winter, right? Everybody knows, or kind of if you're actually, it's funny. I talk to my non-artist friends and I ask them if you see a nice bright shadow on snow, right? A lot of it is actually has a purple color to it. And so it's funny to ask some non-artist people, hey, what's the what color is that shadow? And they can't really see it. Their brain can't separate out that the actual color of the shadow with the actual white snow around it. So they'll often say like, it's kind of gray. And so being able to kind of pick up little sorts of things like that can be really kind of helpful. So it kind of helps to almost train your mind to kind of try to see things in a different light, no pun intended. Um, and so we're just kind of doing little things off the edge here. I'm just kind of trying to highlight again some of the edge here. Um, and so again, I'm not interested in kind of getting every sort of thing perfect. The in this kind of middle area, there's kind of these darker patches. Look for I think what helps a lot for like stuff like bark and things like that is do a lot of eye squinting. That's another simple kind of a tool to use is kind of squint your eyes and look at the basic shapes again of what you're actually trying to kind of paint. So I'm just kind of adding some. I'm gonna try to keep putting this back through here a little bit. I'm working on this area right through here. Okay. I'm painting this shape through here. And so I'm gonna darken it a little bit with just some of the black over the gray. And again, very unorganized. It doesn't need to be organized here. And then I'm just gonna add kind of some of the actual um, kind of colors. There's little tiny like white little dots that are kind of going to pick up some of the light in through here. Um, but again, what will really make it stand out again is kind of highlighting the edges. You can always kind of come back in a little bit later. I'm actually, I kind of lost my dark edge here, so I'm going to kind of re-put that in a little bit. There we go. Um, so this part, there's kind of like a double layer here again of the actual bark. So you can see a highlight line kind of running through here, and then this piece kind of runs around through there. Okay. So I'm going to do this outer edge here now. I'm just going to kind of outline it and don't make it straight. I do really bad. I don't know about some of you. I'm terrible with architectural elements in my art. So you asked me to paint the edge of a house on a straight line. I have a really hard time with it. I tried to paint a windmill, and with all the shapes and everything like that, it was a real kind of somewhat disaster. So I'm not good at that. I don't excel at it. It's probably something I need to certainly practice a lot more. I think with this too, it helps to vary the intensity of the pressure you're putting on with your pencil or the actual pastel itself. And so I'm kind of marking this all the way down to here. And then this bright line kind of follows the edge along through here. Down through here, there's a little bit more whiter kind of color. And then if you think about bark, it kind of often goes kind of up and down and side to side with how the actual wood grows in there. Okay. So just by kind of adding a little bit more of some highlights in through this edge, usually you're pretty good. Okay, so now let's go to this edge here again. This side of the down through here, this side of the bark here that we're doing from here on out, obviously you can see is a lot lighter. There's a lot of white in there, and a lot of a lot of quite bright highlights. So I'm going to try to use for this one, I can use actually, well, let me go back here too. Again, the first thing I want to do on this section again is highlight where is my big shadow and bits of bark going to be. And there's a few on here. I'll come back to the reference photo in a second. Um, but I'm actually trying again to pick up most of the shadows, even though again, this is all black. I'm going to come back and give it some color in a little bit. And I'm actually going to kind of outline the edges of this again. You can do it lightly in black. And let me get this one piece at the bottom. And then again, I'll show you kind of where we're at. Again, if we didn't have the dang technical issues, this would all be a lot easier. But okay. So I've kind of outlined these separate areas here. Okay. So I'm making kind of the shadows here and these little tiny shapes of bark. I'm kind of outlining those, getting those done first. And then I can always add in some more shadow and stuff as I'm going along here. So I'm going to add in kind of again a little purple to get some nice kind of shadows. Do a lot of you use purples in your shadows? Yes. Yeah, like I said, feel free to kind of jump in. Purples are great. Um, for myself, sometimes I'll overdo it, and then the painting may have a purplish cast to it. So I got to kind of watch a little bit. But yes, it's something there that really gives a nice, some nice coloring to the actual piece itself. Okay, so I'm going to add again kind of some of the, let me go add in kind of again these structured pieces. We'll do those last. But let's paint the background kind of along here. I'm going to take kind of again a somewhat of a lighter gray. This is again we're dealing with a lighter color here, and then I'm going to add some. There's a shadow here. Sorry, I'm going to add a little bit more to the side here and make that a little bit more. So the light, one of the things I get burned on a lot of the times, in that I I'm lucky I have a very good friend who lives in Wisconsin. She's a absolutely insanely good um, uh, horse artist. And so we bump ideas off each other, and it's very helpful. Again, I'm happy to do the same for all of you here too, because I just love talking about this stuff. As you might know, I don't shut up. um, um, but she always reminds me you need to pay attention where your light is coming from. It needs to be consistent. So in our picture here, the light is coming and you can tell it easily by where are the shadows coming from. So this is a branch. Actually, this dark line is a branch that's kind of sitting in front. And our shadows are pretty much almost kind of behind. Now, this is the shadow of the top of the hole he's in. Um, so I'm trying to remember when I actually took this photo. I think it was midday. My daughter and I were out on a walk. It was probably shortly after lunch. And so the light was probably somewhat angled, but not like obviously directly overhead. So this is also winter time, so the sun's going to be lighter or lower in the sky. So again, on this edge again, highlight the edges of your shadow. Okay, it's going to give it a lot of depth, and it'll hopefully kind of really um, lighten up, kind of pick up those highlights of where you're at. And again, through here, I'm just going to lightly kind of let the texture of the paper kind of shine through. A lot of pastel artists love doing that. Again, your paper is sanded, and so it can actually really help you out kind of with regards to adding texture to your actual whatever it is you're drawing. Let's see here. So okay, so I'm going to go kind of a light gray on through here until we get to the edge. So I'm going to add. This is one of my sticks. These are one of the Rembrandts, and I'm just going to kind of go all the way down through to the bottom here on this one. Um, and keep the lower pastels are kind of meant for layering. So it's really crucial to keep the your bottom layer thin. Don't apply it. you're going to work always kind of like it's oil paintings. You're going to work dark to light. Okay. So, so here there's not a lot of darks in this area. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply kind of a light um, edge here to this. And then I'm going to try to blend a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect again, because we're dealing with an imperfect subject like bark. Okay. And so I'm just going to kind of smudge that a little bit. And then I'm going to go to either, you can use like your white, your actual white pastel stick, or again, I like using the pencil for bark. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of just basically kind of squiggle in some of the basic colors in through here. And we can see pretty much this color is the exact same. Pretty much I'm going to go all the way down through here, basically, is where our first kind of third is. It's all pretty much pretty white. And as we go a little closer, you can see, hopefully, there's all these little kind of darker gray areas in there, which we'll add back in a second. So I'm just going to kind of let this um, kind of just draw in some of the basic white. I'll get to, again, the edge of it here in a second. We're going to come back to those sections of bark later. But, work slow, bite off little pieces at a time. And like I said, you can try to actually just draw shapes. And I think that helps out a ton with regards to kind of trying to make this look manageable. A lot of people see that and like, oh man, I don't think I can do that, but you really can. It's not quite so hard. Um, how I usually then, once I lay kind of the base layer, I'm looking here, are there other sorts of areas where I could add in? Are there other kind of areas where there's, a little bit of some bark? Well, there's kind of some along the edge. There's a little piece here, which I'll show you in a second, which kind of sticks out along the side, which we'll get to. And then kind of along the bottom, there's kind of this big piece here, which we'll outline, and I'll show you that here in a second. And there's kind of a little bit of um, a kind of a shadow here too. Um, all righty. I'm for now going to ignore this shadow. I think it's kind of distracting and we probably don't need it. I might add it in later, but we'll kind of see. Um, I think it might be something that's I'll in the long run say like, yeah, it adds something to it. I'm not sure yet. I'll see how it's coming out. Okay, so then we'll get to the other piece of bark here in a second. Um, which let's see here, I got this one, and then this comes off the edge here. Okay, and this is another kind of a thicker piece of bark that comes along the bottom. Um, Again, you'll get little areas where like the bark kind of goes almost like a little sideways. I'm going to try to just kind of draw in a little bit of some light areas for this. And then I'll come back and kind of show you where we're trying to head towards. I've painted a lot of reptiles and snakes, things with scales. And so after a while, bark didn't intimidate me much anymore after you've painted like literally hundreds of scales on a snake. So, so once you get the confidence, like, hey, I can actually do this, it's not quite so bad. Um, so a lot of bark structure kind of goes back and forth as well as up and down. And kind of in between, there's often a little bit of like gray and some colors kind of going back through there. Okay, so now I did that. Again, I'm going to take my lights and just try to break up kind of a lot of these lines. We again don't need it to be um, such a slave to all the different colors of whites and everything. But the one thing I do want to do here is start adding in more kind of like change the pressure on your pencil and press harder to get it more lighter. So you get actually um, some difference in shade and value here. So you want to get kind of some of the actual kind of little tiny pieces of the bark that are going to pick up the little uh, the sunlight as it's hitting it. They should have, anytime you're doing any drawing anything, remember it's going to have its highlights, it's going to have its dark shadows, and it's going to have its in between ranges. Okay. So, so trying to make sure you kind of hit all of those is helpful. And again, having a little bit, if we had more time, I'd probably spend slightly a little bit more time on that, on these, but on this, I think we'll skip. So, okay, so we got kind of that part. And I think, again, what's going to help here at this stage, we're going to try doing now, we're going to make these little shapes here, okay, that are the remnants of the bark that are left on the tree. Okay. Okay, so again, these are a little darker. So I'm going to go through with just probably at this stage, I like using for these just kind of sometimes, again, either some black or some dark gray. Okay. And then even on this, I'll kind of do a little bit along the back here. Um, and then we'll get to that in a second here again. Okay. I'm going to use again, with starting again, darkest to light. I'm going to start it with a little bit of black. I'm going to add in just a little bit of some gray, not coloring it in again, just kind of adding little dabs and splashes of color in through there. Um, and then kind of going from there. There's a little edge along that piece there along the bottom. So right away, we've already established now a nice contrast between the underlying white that you're seeing, and then now these little chunks of bark that are left on through here. So all we need generally at this point too is to try to add in some semblance of highlights to this. We're going to pick up again the edges of these things pretty much right away, to kind of try to see, um, to outline those things here too. So we're going to add some bright white kind of along the edge of that, this piece along through here as well. I'm just kind of making random little squiggles on through here too. Um, no one's going to be double checking that. Oh, yeah, you had five little squiggles in here instead of six. Um, so, but again, make sure you get those edges. That really hopefully kind of um, lifts that off. This is the areas again. They're going to be higher, towards you than not, and you can kind of you can always come back a little later, add a little bit more darker color just to kind of give it some variation. And then similar things for this. We're going to really hit this edge because again, the light is going to be hitting this far edge since it's elevated here. And then kind of a little bit along through the back and kind of down along through here. Let's see here. Got that. This little piece is going to be bent over. I'll show you in a second here again. And then um, if you wanted to keep it a little darker again, then you can just kind of go back and add a little like bend in there too, to kind of see where you're going and where the light is kind of bending. Okay, so this is kind of where we're at on the painting. Whoops, let me go. I'll show it up a little. Whoops, let me have it go down. There we go. So we're trying to get this without moving it too much. Yep, there we go. The top keeps coming out of it. But anyway, so we're all the way kind of up through here now. We've added in these little areas. And now what's really going to kind of make it the edge of the bark pop is now we have the inside part of this, the inside part of the image here. So like I mentioned, this is going to be something that is going to be really, really kind of dark. For this, you'd probably want to use a fair amount of black, okay, in through here, or at least something very, very dark, and then add colors to your black. Or sometimes you can have some of my other colors here too. There are some you can use some like almost like some navy blues kind of along in the back. The color probably isn't perfect with that. There are some darker browns that actually have some degree of they look really kind of nice as well. I honestly for this like to use for my really dark start with black as your base color and then add in like a little bit of color. For this something harmonious, I'd probably pick a dark brown or something like that to use in with the black to give it a little bit of life and a little bit of color. Okay, so I'm going to be kind of bold here with this. We're just going to go all the way back through here. And let's see, the edges of his little cute little head here kind of stick out to about through here. So I'm going to kind of go along through here, along the edge. You can see there. Sometimes you'll lose edges initially. You can always go back and then kind of pick them up. So this material, this type of pastel, this is actually some of the unisons here. It's very easy to lay down. You don't need to use a lot. So once you get that in there, then you can try to blend a lot of this back together. I'll need a little bit more there. It's kind of chinsing too much on it. Anybody got any good animal painting stories? Trying to think of some. The hard thing with painting animals is that they move like all the time. So they're difficult unless you're actually there just kind of sketching with a nice sketch pad or something like that. They can be kind of difficult to paint. So that's why photography is helpful. It also makes me, coming back with my black here just along the edge here. It also amazes me then like how in the old days you had like the artists were so good like Charles Russell and things like that, who is one of my favorites for like horse art, how good they were with just knowing anatomy off the top of their head, that they did all those drawings and paintings without cameras, without photos, right? They were just sketching and painting and they remembered all that stuff. So so really pretty amazing. Okay, so I'm just going to add in a little bit of the color here. This actually blends out. So that's all you need to do, kind of make it like a little squiggly kind of type of a thing, and then kind of just blend it in there. When we're getting near the end of time, I'll kind of take this thing out and move it a little bit closer to the camera. But that actually, it's hard to see on here now, but it gives a little bit of some a reddish color to the black, which actually is kind of really helpful on that end. All righty. So the next thing I want to kind of do is draw the back part of the wood, at least around up through here of the hole. Okay. So again, got little shapes. I'm not thinking I'm actually drawing a hole. And that's not even really entering my mind here. I'm just kind of paying attention to kind of this shape through here. And it's a darker gray, again, that's going to sit in through here. But there is a fair amount of white in there, or excuse me, not white, lighter kind of a gray. So I'm going to start with actually probably with this, what the color that works best is kind of like a dark gray. I'm going to go all the way up to like the ear tuft on this side um, of the um, of the bird. So it's kind of hard to appreciate when you do paint and like weird little things and you're not working on one particular thing at a time. It's kind of hard to appreciate how well you're doing or how bad you're doing. And that's again where I think it's really helpful to use that little mirror trick. That's super helpful because again, it kind of um, lets you know, okay, this isn't looking right or whatever. I'm gonna go around his other ear tuft thing here too. Maybe trying to see if part of this will show up under through. I'll leave it under here. There we go. That'll be good enough at least. Again, this is not a good thing. I'm out of photo paper, unfortunately, and I had planned to kind of be able to put the image on for the thing here. So I can actually go further back with the black. It should pretty much be right around there. The old health issue, should you blend with your fingers, always comes up too. Kind of yes and no. Most of the pastels nowadays are really quite, safe. There shouldn't be any major issues. I do hear occasionally of people having issues with the dust. Okay. So if that is the case, then in general, you can wear a mask. Same thing with the fingers. If you don't like the dust on there, just get some latex gloves and you can use those to kind of blend as well. Um, so there are ways to safely kind of pastel.
John, how long do you spend on most of these paintings? Like, what is an average?
It depends on size. Probably most of my sizes are around like 12 by 16, somewhere in there. Probably a 12 by 16, probably 20 to 30 hours, which is so different than a lot of pastels with big mark making. The one reason I've kind of started liking to or getting back to doing some of my oil painting, which I hadn't done in many years, is to help me loosen up a little bit with my pastels. I kind of, as much as I love the detail in the end, it kind of you can almost over detail a painting, you know what I mean, and have it be too busy. And so that's why I don't want to try to paint every little single, be a slave to every single little, um, piece of line that's showing up in there. Our brain should hopefully finish the image for us. We don't need it um, we don't need to see every little detail, but I like detailed subjects. Like I mentioned, I do a lot of, I think the details, the beauty is in the details of animals like, snakes I did my veiled chameleon, which was really kind of cool. And even just, hair patterns, the different shapes of eyes, all the different animal world things are really, I've ever since I was a little kid, I've always had a huge fascination with animals, and mom and dad were nice enough to basically let me keep anything I found. They are my brothers, and my dad would always have a really soft heart, so he would pick up things like and I'm like a couple of times he worked in Chicago, and there'd be like injured pigeons he'd find on the way to work, and he'd take those home. And so our house became quite the little kind of menagerie of everything, growing up. Um, so I got in here some colors. I'm kind of making the background here. And this is a good way to add in some of, again, like the Payne's gray, the deep purple.
And I didn't remember if you said what kind of pencils you're using.
Oh, no, I didn't. I mentioned the sticks. I didn't mention the pencils. And I like pastel pencils a lot because I like drawing a lot. So if you like drawing, give these a try. They're certainly not as messy, and you can blend them. So they're very much like can be used like any other sort of pencil. These are called Carbothello, CARB, and then there's a big O, and then Thello. Carbothello. This is the. Let me get you the show you what it looks like. Stabilo is the actual
Mm,
brand, or
okay.
Carbothello, I think, is Stabilo's brand. It's actually Stabilo is the company, and I like their Carbothellos. A lot of artists like these. There's a couple other ones that they really like. I've tried one once and I kind of liked it. I haven't used them yet. I probably will. I can't, the name is bypassing me now, unfortunately. But They're all pretty good. Pastel pencils are notoriously a pain in the butt to sharpen. They like to crack. And so I got from my aunt a new sharpener for Christmas, so I haven't tried it yet. I could let all of you know how it works. I was planning on, since I'm doing this, I was planning on trying to, as this painting continues on, I'm kind of I'll try it and I can give a little review on it. Um, I oftentimes will use just an X-Acto knife or like a box cutter knife and just whittle it away, okay, to get it to the point I like. This actually I don't mind like using it. It's the Prismacolor pencil sharpener. Works pretty good as well. It's got two little tops in there. One's for like thicker pencils, one's for thinner. Um, you have to be careful. You can't crank it really hard or the tip, you can't over sharpen them. You can't over sharpen them this way. And what will happen is the tip sorry, there we go. It's backwards. The tip will break off in the actual hole. And then you got to take it apart and try to pop the pastel broken tip out or just shake it a lot or bang it on the counter to get the actual piece of like pastel out of there. But but yeah, they work pretty good. I don't usually care too much if I have a really fine tip, unless I really need super really kind of fine detail. Um, for something like whiskers or something like that, you want a really sharp tip. And actually, while we're talking about it, we don't have whiskers on this guy. So if you're doing whiskers, what I like to do is take the pencil and as with a really nice sharp tip, let's see, well, this one is a pretty sharp tip. And I usually, most of them are white, obviously, but I like to make a quick mark and then I roll it as I um, you know, um, as I make the actual line. And by doing that, and I also let up pressure. So you're kind of pressing a little bit harder and then kind of twist it. And the line kind of thins out at the end. It's kind of weird. It almost seems like for me, it needs a warm up period. I need to do like 10 of these first before I actually am happy with how I'm making the lines. And then at that point, I'll make the whiskers. Now, if your whisker line isn't nice and perfect, then you just kind of color in around it, okay, to make it, give you a nice fine edge, something like that. If it goes over your background, then just add a little bit of your background color along the edge of the whisker to get a nice fine tip on it. Um, but anyway, so that's one of the things you can do. There are some lines that you can't really see on this painting, but that are there of the wood in the back. Um, and there's a couple kind of cracked areas along the wood. I don't know about you. I find old broken wood and even things like driftwood or whatever just so beautiful. And it's just so neat to see how Mother Nature and kind of how all this stuff kind of dries out. And remember too, it's all this dried wood is a home to, I'm doing my environmental hat on here too, but all these, the dead trees and everything are a beautiful home for so many different things. We have a kind of a dying maple in the back here and backyard, but we get every year, besides the squirrels, we got a family of squirrels living in the knot holes in there every year, but also the northern flickers, those birds make a home in there. Food for woodpeckers and shelter and everything else. So really kind of neat to realize, not to mention you got the insects and then the birds that eat the insects. So they're all kind of important in through there as well. So again, this is I just made kind of some darker lines to make the little tiny cracks in the back. I'll probably darken those up here because they're just not showing up quite so well as I'd like. Um, I'm just going to take a little bit of the dark gray, or excuse me, the black and kind of go over the dark gray. And then I'll just kind of stop there and we can start working on the feathers a little bit here too. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is, like I said, I want to get the same value roughly of this. So I'm going to add some purple again to it. It's hard to say what color that is. It almost looks like there's a hint of like slight brown in there as well. But I'm going to add this along the back for now as well. The far edge over here is darker. I'm going to darken that up again a little bit more. I'm just hopefully kind of adding that in a little bit. And darken this up again a little bit more on this end. There is kind of a distinct line. It's hard to see again that makes up this back edge through here. And then as it comes closer to the front of the knot hole, it obviously gets lighter and lighter a little bit. So I'm going to try to keep that in mind. Again, just thinking about the light and everything else.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
it's getting a little bit late. Would it be possible for you to show us some of the work on the feathers on the actual
Yep.
owl?
It's what I'm actually planning on doing here now too. I was just hoping that could make them pop a little bit more. All righty. So I think the feathers will start doing around the nose and stuff here. Okay. So to try to get some texture, there's a few little technique things that you can kind of try to do as well. So again, you're kind of doing shapes. I'm going to start with like my darker colors first. So I'm going to kind of put in the black around like the nose here. Okay. So that's what I'm going to start doing first. And then there's a little bit of a darker area between here. So again, kind of the main thing is just laying down your colors that you want. So we're going to work on kind of this little tuft in the middle here. So we're going to start with some of the kind of like a uh, red orange kind of color along through the back. Start that over here, and then it goes a little bit ahead of the thing through here, all the way to the edge up through here. Okay. Again, there's a shadow kind of at the bottom. Think of again the 3D nature of these feathers. So I'm going to add a little bit of kind of a little bit of a purple around the bottom for a little bit of a shadow. And then at this point, trying to just match your colors kind of as best you can a little bit to kind of where you're going with everything. So here's some brown we're going to use. And I'm going to kind of go along the edge here. We're going to add a little bit of some of these dots. Again, they don't have to be perfect on where these feather dots are kind of. I'm just going to add in the basic kind of colors through there. And then kind of on this side, we got a little bit along through here and kind of again a little bit along the bottom. Then from here, one of the colors I like to kind of use for this is kind of like almost like a pink along the top, a flesh tone actually. And then in normally I would do this area first so that when I would layer this area, it would actually show up. I wouldn't have to paint around it with dark later. I could just add it to the dark, but we'll just kind of add that along the top. And then I'll do some of these bigger feathers along the bottom too. It's kind of hard to see a little bit. And then these kind of go along off to the side a little bit. And then there is kind of some more, just a few little bits of white. I'm going to kind of throw those in there. You can see that a little bit. And then again, also the feathers themselves stick to drawing shapes. Okay, underneath. Don't try to draw it like each individual feather. Draw the colors that you're seeing in these shapes and then kind of go from there. So this little black piece in the middle goes a little bit further up. So similar sort of a thing along this side. We're going to draw this color through here. We're going to do the color along the top. And then you can do just kind of some suggestions of some color in through there. And then again, kind of these squiggly lines along the bottom. So for some of the bigger feathers, and let's go to the ones around it, the bright white ones. So the next one that's kind of there is like these feathers right along the edge here going up along the side. So so what we're going to do, just going to take these again, take my white, draw through that. We're going to go a little bit along the side, and then there's kind of a bright white feather that's along the edge here. And again, just drawing the shapes of this stuff. There's a shadow at the base of the feathers here. Just going to add a little lighter gray. Remember, everything has shadows to it again. So half the battle is kind of recognizing that. You can kind of add on some of the white. And then again, we're just kind of drawing the shapes of these feathers kind of right along the base here. And then I'll show you the white here in a little trick kind of in a second on some of this. So let's go by the dark part. I'm just going to try to see. I should be able to do this. Hopefully, Jeff, you won't kill me too much on here. Okay. Hold on. I got it here. Oops, the other way. There we go. Okay. I wanted to try to kind of show this a little bit more, bring this up periodically. Okay, so we're kind of looking at kind of that area of the nose a little bit. You can see kind of the bark we were looking at. If you kind of squint your eyes and look at the bark, it looks a lot more like bark than you think. Let me get this though here too. Okay, so we're going to be kind of doing these feathers along the nose here, just so that we can kind of show you the one neat little trick here. And to try to get the softness of feathers or fur, this is kind of where some pastels can really kind of shine. So I'm going to take the orange feathers around it here again a little bit on each side. And there's kind of a little bit in the middle. There's kind of a lighter red in the middle there. I'm going to use a little touch of orange, as well as a little bit of kind of the red on top of that. And then let's see, get back to kind of the dark here. And then coming from the side, there are these feathers. I'm going to use a light gray kind of coming along the side of the side of the beak here like this. And then again, we have kind of our orange in around through here. I'm going to add a little bit of the light gray kind of along the side. So for this part, what oftentimes you can do, here's again a piece of the feather that's kind of coming across the nose here. That's kind of what we're doing with that. And then you have kind of these other feathers underneath with the edge of those. So, and then you have kind of the edge off to the side. So one of the things you can do that I really like with like a lot of pastel feathers, or that you can do with pastels off to the side, when you're trying to get actually the edges of feathers like this, to kind of get them to shine a little bit more. And I'll jump to some of the feathers on the bottom here in just a second. Is take your hand and go from the thicker part of it out. Okay, it's not really easy to see on this, but what that does is it really softens the edge of the feathers and gives a much softer appearance to it. Let's try like this one down at the bottom through here. Okay, so let's do, this is kind of a lighter feather in here. It's got kind of like an orange to it. It's the bottom of it is a little darker, so I'm going to add, we're looking at this feather right here. Whoops. Yeah, right there. That's what we're doing along with the ones around it. So going to add the orange there, and then underneath it, there's again a little bit more orange. Um, and then up on the top of it, you get a really nice bright white, which we'll color in a little bit later. And that white kind of goes along to the side here as well, and then even along the bottom. But this area through here, um, you actually have like a separate layer of feathers covering these feathers. And so I'm just kind of drawing them in a little bit randomly. I'll show it up to the camera here in a second. Um, and I'm also going to kind of add a little bit of, this is one of the brighter areas on here. So I'm going to add a bright white kind of in through here and kind of along the bottom of this feather as well. So again, doing something like this, if you just kind of take your finger and kind of go down all the way through, it's hard to see it on this, but it gives kind of like a softer, nicer edge. It shines again um, along kind of say like the edge where it meets like a background, because then you'll have the contrasting. Let's just do it over here. You have the contrast um, of the actual softness of the feathers along with the dark background. So we're gonna try this here too and just kind of darken this up in a second here. Let's see here. That actually is all the way up through here. And so for just example's sake, let's take, and I just want to like show a few of like these spikies that I made here. And you can kind of see a pretty well-defined line with each of these. But the blending on the edge of these is really kind of nice. You can basically just take your finger and kind of smudge it a little bit. And now you took those really nice, fine, sharp lines, and now you've given it like a nice kind of fuzzy edge a little bit that hopefully you can kind of see that it's always backwards, which messes me up. There we go. That actually would give kind of like a nice appearance of fuzz, right? So you have like kind of like a fuzzy edge on that. Whereas beforehand you had individual kind of stripy lines. So I guess too, that brings me to kind of like talking about like edges. And we mentioned already like sharp, coarse edges along using like, something like this to give you some degree of definition for this. But paying attention to edges to front and back. So in other words, trying to make sure that as things go distant from you, that the edges are going to be more blurred. Okay. And that is actually something really important. I'm actually jurying the Artist Network competition, the other pet category right now for Artist Network magazine. And so many pieces are really pretty good, but there's just like some technical things like having poor edges for like something that was way too detailed for being in the back. And again, maybe that's the artist's intention or not. And juries are so subjective anyway. So don't ever take a rejection from a show personally or anything. I get rejected a fair amount of times from shows still. Everybody does. They're really weird. There's certain rules that the jurors have to follow. There's just um, a lot of things behind the scenes that there are a lot of people who are borderline that will never know that they were just like so close. So, and you may always be one of those people. So don't take that personally at all. It's always easier said than done. I don't take rejection well personally, but it is something to kind of just keep in mind. Um, the fuzziness for this, maybe I can get a little bit better thing is kind of right underneath here. You see how that's kind of nice and fuzzy. Let me try and see if I can get that recreated for you before the end here. So we got some slightly darker feathers kind of on the underneath here. I'm just going to go kind of again and get some base darker color. I'm going to add a little bit of some of the kind of the light pink to it off to the side, um, along the bottom here. Yeah, when you're not used to working quickly, it's such a challenge. And then above that, we have kind of a layer of feathers. This layer of feathers is actually sticking out towards you, right? So we're going to see if we can get a nice edge on those that looks kind of fuzzy. We're going to grab and maybe some orange here that sits right above it on this view. And then we'll darken it up in a second here. Again, a little bit more that are over here and kind of across as we're going through. Start seeing some of these. It kind of gets really dark again. You want to have that behind, right in kind of this area through here, where there's kind of shadow underneath that area. Then what we're doing, the edges of these feathers again are kind of coming towards you. So they're kind of sticking out right at you. This kind of white one is this guy right here that you're seeing. So we're drawing that kind of right in through here. And I'll bring it up to the camera again in a second when we're all set. Then you have a couple of them sticking out against kind of that darker layer. If any of you have pets, you know the challenge of trying to keep your your working surfaces clean of pet hair. It's at least for me, it's a problem. We got 2 dogs and 3 cats, and so the pet hair gets everywhere. So what I want to try to do is get kind of this fuzzy look, and I'll show it again here in a second, just by some of these feathers kind of sticking out. So can you see kind of, I'm just making some areas that I want to go ahead and kind of blur a little bit. And to try, and this works for fur as well, especially like on ears, tufts of ears or tails or things like that. So I'm going to do that and then just basically take my finger and go from the center or from the back part of that feather where move it toward the edge you want to soften. Okay. So I'm just going to go back, kind of try this again, and then I'll show you. And then hopefully, again, it might be a little bit harder to appreciate kind of the fuzzy look, but that's kind of what you want to get. Okay, so I'm going to do this, sorry, one more time. Okay, so I am going to just kind of, your colors will kind of darken a little bit. So you might need to take, when you do that, so you might need to take a little bit of your whiter whites and just kind of highlight the edge through here or something like that. Okay. But so initially we started with kind of some of those really sharp, fine lines. And so try to actually kind of soften that. I think it's kind of hard to appreciate since nothing else is kind of around it. But if you actually kind of Where you ever want to soften an edge on your painting, always move it from the center outwards so that you can actually kind of achieve some nice kind of again a nice softness to the edge. Let's try maybe it'll be a little bit exaggerated, but let's go to the ear tip here. And that's fine. Take this, we'll add in. This isn't their ear, by the way, too. I just call it an ear tip. It's just feathers that stick out on the top of their head. Has nothing to do with hearing. Their ears are on the side of the head, actually. So it's kind of dark back through here. Let's take the gray for the ears here. And I'm going to get the darker gray in here first. I'm actually liking this dark gray. This is the first time I've actually used it. I ordered it a while ago and haven't really used it much. And here again, I'm probably going to use a lighter gray for the top here. And again, we can pretend that this is more lit than it actually is. Just drawing in the stripes here. Let's see here, kind of doing these areas through here. Okay. And then getting this around the side. And then through here, I'm going to add some of that red in, red brown. And always add some darkness to that. So with a little bit of black. But from here, what I want to again illustrate kind of more than anything is like, how can we get kind of like a nice soft edge? Let's assume that ear tip is like that. To get kind of like a nice soft one, we're just going to basically take, the finger and kind of move it out toward the side. Okay. You'll smudge it a little bit, but okay. So that actually, if you're contrasting around it with, let's add some more black along the edge here. Get it a little darker. It really kind of can give a nice softer kind of look to it with any of the feathers. I've gone through actually whole paintings when they're done like this, and then just go ahead and kind of go off to the side in the direction of the feather to kind of give a whole softer look to the whole thing. So we'll do it again in the same area here just for yucks. I'll add in again a little bit of white. And let's say we want to soften it, then we'll just take again the finger and just kind of go through that. And that gives a nice kind of soft pointy ear now up at the top. Okay. So that's one thing that you can kind of do for some of this, again, to kind of give some sort of texture or softness to the actual image. Let's see here. Anybody else want to see anything else or talk about anything else pastel wise? I'll keep working here as well, but anybody else have any thoughts, questions? Anybody else cursing the fact that we couldn't get the stupid document cam to work right now, other than me and Jeff? So I want to just work on this area again so we can kind of finish up this ear a little bit. And again, kind of show you what things may look like. Here's darker again along the back. And so trying to achieve some degree of depth in the paintings always is super hugely important. So see, I'm going to add.
Okay. Probably about another 10 minutes, John.
Yeah, okay. Sounds good.
So anyone has questions, get them in.
How many, I can't see a show of hands or anything, Jeff, but how many, kind of want to ask how many people like have interest in pastels, or they actually kind of work in them a lot? Anybody?
I can't tell. I know there are a couple artists here that I know do pastels, but I don't know if everyone does. So
We know I did.
yeah, I know
Would it?
Debbie's on here. I know she loves
Debbie
pastels.
did too.
I
Mhm.
love pastels. And
Yeah.
I do oil too, but pastels, I like the freedom of them.
Yep, exactly. It's your first love.
Yeah.
Same with me, art wise.
Mhm.
Um, so kind of for covering big areas like this, kind of, go ahead and go through there. Some other techniques that people use, they'll block in big areas first of like the whole painting. So they may go ahead and do, um, whole things of just, adding in a block of color in somewhere. They may blend it or they'll add something to it. Um, just with this, you can still blend and see sometimes some of the underlying colors. It all kind of depends again on how thick you want to go with some of the brands. And these ones, the Rembrandts don't blend quite as nicely um, as say the other one, the unisons. Here's This is one of the colors I was looking for. So, you just basically just barely touch that on there and look at that, how nicely it kind of fades into everything. I used so little of it, even though they're pretty expensive. You can just dab it on that way um, and that'll get you the color. I've also too for sometimes I'll actually just put the color on my finger and then kind of blend it that way as well.
That's great.
So that's another kind of simple way if you don't want to lay down a huge amount of pigment on there. Again, so you can just add that little tiny bit, and look at that. Now we filled in that whole area basically, which is kind of nice. That's that area we're kind of looking at all through here,
I think
right?
one of the reasons I don't do them too much anymore is because of the storage of them. Because you
Great
have to,
point.
yeah.
Yes. The storage for how I store these is I'll buy these plastic clear bags and you can actually just put them in the clear bag when they're finished. You will get some dust in the bag, and it freaks a lot of people out. When I'm shipping like ones that aren't framed, I always have to send a piece of paper in there that says, when you open this, there's going to be dust on the inside of pastel dust on the inside of the bag. Don't worry about it. It's not really affecting the quality of your painting at all. And what's going to happen with that. And then I just store them in boxes on top of each other in the plastic bags themselves. Um, and so, yeah, some people, that is a major turnoff, as well as the framing and everything else like that. I think a lot of the techniques are still applicable to a lot of other media. If depending, I don't know, I don't work really in colored pencils, and I don't know if they can blend quite so much. But I know there's various types of other pencil products. You can add water, almost like the watercolor thing, and but for me, the blending is kind of the number one thing pastel wise that I really, really kind of enjoy. Um,
I think you get a better brightness with a pastel. I use color pencils, and it's very difficult with the whites and stuff to really get. Whereas with pastels, you get, because it's so pure pigment, you're going to get a much brighter, some of the brighter colors are going to like pop more.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
that's,
I agree. They have a certain luminosity to them, I think is the
yeah.
big fancy word they always like using for that. Um, and so I'm just going to finish kind of up this here a little bit. And any other part of this that someone wants me to work, I could try the beak a little bit. It's another interesting texture. How does that, anybody want me to see do that, or yes, no? Um, the beak itself, the beak is an interesting thing. It's often, again, the colors are not what you would expect. There's actually like some greens and blues in there. Um, One of the things that's important when you're, again, trying to, for any media, again, I think anyway, is just trying to make sure you're actually picking your correct color. The computers nowadays make it a lot easier. you have certain software that does the color pick, thing. You can move your cursor right over the edge of it, and it'll actually tell you what the color actually is. Um, so kind of makes it a little bit um, quote unquote cheating. There's so much cheating in art nowadays. Stupid AI is that's a whole other discussion. How are you guys? Are you guys planning on doing that as a talking about the perils of AI in art, um, in fine art anyway? Yeah, it can be a real bane to everybody, and not to mention too, it's bad for the environment and everything else. I guess it's
I
fine for
would
like
I
a
wouldn't want to get started on that because I'd go into
yeah.
a 2 hour rant on it. It's like,
Yes, you're exactly right. It's such a uh, yeah, I don't want to go there. So
yeah,
yeah,
AI has a lot of good stuff that it can do, but it's some of the stuff like the art and
yeah, it needs to
it's
stay
like
in like
why they love to do
medicine
it.
and science, and
Anyways,
that's its yeah. So here again, I have my basic lines, and I'm gonna, a beak structure is really kind of interesting. It's hard keratin, right? And so I'm just doing my basic kind of colors that I'm seeing here, and then I'm gonna blend that. Okay. And so simply by kind of blending it, I'm giving it a little bit more of a homogeneous kind of thing. And then really with that, then pretty much it's just trying to add in, highlights and shadows. So he's got a little bit of actually I need to go a little bit more with some of the blue up at the top. It's a little bit more shadowed up through there and a little bit darker through here. So I don't know, I'm hoping to kind of, at least you can take some of your techniques from here and apply them to whatever medium, you kind of try to use. Okay, so I did that, added a little bit more, and now I got kind of, again, like a more of a homogeneous kind of surface in through there. And then again, it's just kind of at this stage, adding in the the highlights on here and trying to get a little bit more of where so then for this, usually I'll just add some very, very subtle, barely touching the thing to the pencil to the paper, of adding in kind of like a highlight to it. Uh, and then I'm just going to add some background around it so that you can see it a little bit better. Um, and then we get the There we go. So, so from that, kind of just looking up close. So now, whoops. Okay, there we go. So now I've actually kind of added some, making it look a little bit more like a beak. There's a little bit of, I need to add a little bit more shadowing in there as well for some of the purple. A lot of it, again, it's going to be hidden under there we go. This looks much, much better. There we go. Okay. And then adding kind of the feathers around it will generally, hopefully too here, make it kind of come alive there. All righty. Jeff, I don't know what the scoop is here for you. You want me to keep going? You want to talk about other things in the next few minutes, a couple little minutes we have left, or
well, why don't we just
whatever?
do questions from the group here? If
Questions on the group. Thank you
What,
all. First of all.
when's your next, what are you in some shows or anything?
Trying to think here. It's actually kind of most of the show season is over, or at least it starts again kind of springtime. What do I have come? I'm applying to a number of different shows. I don't have anything in a show. I actually just got a bunch of things sent back to me that didn't sell. So actually, no, I don't have any. I don't actually have anything in a show and any shows coming up. I'm trying to get a couple into a couple Society of Animal Artists show. There's a huge one, Birds and Art in Wausau, that's like the Super Bowl for bird art. Everybody tries to get in there. They get something. It's like 100. They get roughly they get over like 1,000 applications, and they accept about no, it's not even that. Yeah, I think it's like a few thousand, and they accept like 80 pieces. So the acceptance rate is like one out of every 8 or 9 paintings that gets sent in. I've tried 9 years in that one to get in, and haven't yet. So, and I've sent in things that I thought were my best, and they still aren't. So again, it's very jurying and shows if you have if you have any interest in kind of some of that stuff, again, send me an email. The show thing is really kind of fascinating. There's actually kind of like a strategy I think you should have if you want to enter shows and potentially have success. I think there is a little bit of kind of thought behind which shows to enter. Like I've been in the Society of Animal Artists annual show 5 times, and all but the last time was in because which is fine. I like painting these subjects anyway, because I painted something very non-traditional. Thinking outside the box. This is actually what I'm writing up in my blurb. Does anybody want to hear about this or no? Because if not, I can go on to
Yeah,
something
sure.
else.
I want to hear about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
sure.
The show thing is kind of interesting. Like I said, doing this show now and jurying it, there are certain things that most jurors, and I've kind of talked to other people who've juried shows as well, they really like things that kind of are outside the box a little bit, looking at something in a brand new way. Um, so, at least for me on the animal circuit, that means stuff like somebody painting a very non-traditional animal, maybe somebody doing portraying that animal, a very common animal, but in a very non-traditional way. Um, I probably can't talk about it in case somebody knows the artist, but there was an artist who submitted a painting of a pretty common farm animal, just done in a very surprising, very fresh, bright way that immediately caught my attention. Um, and also too, just kind of different things. Use of color, is how's everything done. And then there's the technical aspects, which actually is kind of interesting, and it probably got more people eliminated than anything again on the animal circuit because for animals, the anatomy general, if you're going for realism, the anatomy has to be pretty much spot on. If it isn't, I had to eliminate some really, really great horse pieces, but every one had major problems. One, like the front leg wasn't done properly. The other one, the eye was done all wrong. But the rest of it was flawless, which is frustrating because I really wanted those pieces to go on. But I can't really, in good conscience, kind of when they were trying for that, I'd rather actually accept someone else who maybe did something that I guess was maybe not quite as intriguing, but was actually done correctly, I guess is a good way to put it. So there's all these weird things jurors have to think about. And most of the time, yeah, you're going to be a victim of those things at one time or another. And I have. There's been times where I've sent something into a show and then I look at it, while you're being juried, and I see a big mistake in the painting that I sent in. I'm like, oh no. And sure enough, it doesn't make it in. So,
And
so the
where do you, how and where do you sell your art? Do you have stuff in galleries or what do you do?
I don't have any gallery representation. I haven't really pursued it yet. It might be something I might pursue when I retire, a little bit more and can actually have more time to kind of devote more to having a steady stream of gallery, of something in a gallery. I wouldn't want to sign a contract and then not be able to deliver, by not producing enough. I usually the selling is very interesting too, and that's a whole point. We had a good seminar on this Society of Animal Artists wise, and these people sell a lot. And the interesting thing is the vast majority of sales come from repeat customers. like 70%. And I found that to be the case myself. Probably the vast majority, 3 out of every 4 paintings I sell are to people who've already bought a painting of mine. So it's important to keep good connections with the people who bought your art. Shows for me generally don't sell very well. I'll sell occasionally, maybe once a year, I'll sell a painting at a show. I probably enter 5 to 7 shows a year and probably get in 75% of those. And of those, I probably get 1 or 2 sales. So not usually a lot. And it's not just me. I think a lot of other artists generally don't get a ton of sales. Some do, and that's great. I think some people just have a knack they portray with what people really want to see. And and I think on that aspect, it really resonates with a lot. They just have a good knack of being able to resonate with purchasers, which is kind of a unique talent. Because a lot of times, yeah, I'm sure all of us have paintings we're really proud of, and it's all of a sudden it's like, why isn't this thing selling? It's been on my wall for 5 years and it just hasn't found its home yet. you know so that's my kind of scoop on it. I don't know if some of you have better experiences you could share. Hopefully you do. Things like that, but yeah, it's not so much. Art also too goes through notoriously economic phases. Art is a luxury, usually for most people. They want to buy something with extra cash that really hits them, that they can make a connection with. And so when times get tough, your pool of buyers starts to shrink. And so when you get, an economy that might be in a bad way for something, you're probably going to lose a lot of like your mid-range kind of purchasers. And now you're going to be, kind of having people who have this a lot of disposable money who might just be looking to purchase, some art for somewhere.
Yeah.
So that actually is an interesting factor that fits into this as well. I think
And
a lot of people who do a lot of sales, they work really hard at it. They do a lot of groundwork, they do a lot of shows, they do a lot of festivals. And so that's where a lot of, um, and I've seen that from other people too. Like there's a really awesome scratchboard artist named Kathy Sheeter. She's absolutely incredible with some of her stuff. If you like scratchboard, absolutely you need to find her on Facebook. Um, and she does a show circuit all year. She's not married. She has her show dog. She does show dog things, and so she goes to the different show dogs, but things with her Malinois, and then she ends up with just doing all the local festivals. She gets the tent, she sets it up, and she goes from town to town to festival, and that's how she kind of helps make a lot of her income as well. So
well, I've always said that it's a lot of it is you have to have the right piece of work at the right time with the right person coming through that sees
yeah,
it.
yeah. A lot of
And
it is luck. It's weird,
what gets me is when
hard work and
when you
luck.
have people that are coming in to look for it. And I had something like this at the gallery the other day. Is that they come in, husband and wife, they just bought a house and they redid the walls. All the walls are just painted out or white or whatever. Okay, but they have nothing on the walls, and so they're looking. So he says, oh, I like this one. And she says, oh no, those colors don't go with the paint that we're going to do the walls on. you know, and it's like, okay, obviously art isn't the thing for them,
Yeah,
just to
yeah,
enjoy good art. So
yeah. Each
anyway,
buyer has to resonate with them. They
yes,
usually have to make a connection with it. A lot of times you'll see people at a show. If you're at a show and someone is walks by it, there's some body language things that some people have said they're really interesting. Actually doing this, someone putting their hands on their chin is a really good indicator that that person is very interested in your piece and they
yeah.
may be potentially likely to buy it.
Yeah,
So,
I had one show over at the Starline where really unusual because it was close to shutting down time or closing time, and I walking around, and there's 3 people standing looking at my piece, and it's mom and dad with a son, and they're there to buy his son a painting or whatever he wants for his birthday, and so they're looking at my piece, And he decides, yeah, okay, this is the piece I want. And I'm standing there, I'm talking to him, and I'm asking, well, what attracted you to this piece? And it was an abstract. And he said, it's just that it's the way my mind feels sometimes,
Hmm. That's a
and
great
it's like,
response. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, okay. But
Yeah.
I like I like doing shows where I can talk to people as they're looking at my pieces and see what they have
Yeah.
to say about them. So just to get a feel for it.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Yeah. It's got to resonate in some weird way. That's why you never know who might buy a piece. It's really bizarre. And I just had a piece recently. One of my more recent pieces that sold was something that had been on my wall for years. And the gentleman came over and looked at it and he was like, my wife loves that. It was a horse painting. And she goes, she had a horse that looked really kind of similar to that. And so he was buying his original painting that he wanted to buy from me. And then he saw that one. And he said, wait a minute, he goes, okay, if I take a picture of it and show it to my wife. And I'm like, absolutely. And so he did. And she fell in love with it just from the photo. And so he ended up buying that. And it just, yeah, has to find it. Everybody says it needs to find its home. It is true, though
yeah.
it comes to a point where, like, I'm sick of looking at these things. I need to get them off my wall. Yeah, exactly.
It more the connection it makes with the viewer.
Pardon?
The connection with the viewer.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. Yeah, it is. And it's different for everybody. There's someone out there for the painting. It's just a matter of them hopefully coming across your thing somewhere. Social media is very helpful. I generally don't like, a lot of what it does to people. But if you have an art business or something, I have sold paintings through social media through basically people who've seen maybe not even my work. They've seen, like, I'm friends with them in some other way, and I post something and they really like it. And then one of their friends really likes it. And so I've had one of my repeat customers. He, yeah, I can't even remember how I met him. He just had friended me on Facebook, and he liked one of my animal pieces. I can't remember after I posted it, and yeah, it was bizarre. And now he's bought two things. You need to make sure that obviously you get paid first using, like, some good reputable thing if you really don't know the person. But that's the nice thing about cash. Cash is always good. Or if you're doing festivals, again, yeah, really making sure that,
Yeah.
it's hard.
Okay.
Scammers,
All right.
especially with art, are big nowadays too.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else have any questions? It's 9 o'clock, and I think it's time to wrap this up a little bit.
I'm
Joanne?
happy to talk to
I'm
anybody
good.
about this stuff all the time. I love talking art. So if you want to just, again, friend me on Facebook, ask me questions about your art, anything, I'm happy to talk, help, just talk about pastels, whatever. So yeah,
Okay.
I
Okay.
Thank
enjoyed
you,
it.
Okay.
Thanks,
John.
John.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thank you so
And
Thank
much.
you.
Great.
Thank you. This was very interesting.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Aruna. Thank you, everybody. I really
Very
appreciate it.
nice.
Thank you for thinking of me. And I'm so bummed that it didn't work the way we wanted. Hopefully, you could still see enough. But as it's done, and if you have any other questions or anything, feel free to ask. Maybe I can try doing some of this on, like, if I get it fixed, maybe I could do a Facebook thing on it or something.
Are
Like
you
a
going to
live.
finish that painting then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Send us a
You
picture
want
so
to
we
send me
can,
a picture of the finished
the
painting,
finished
and I'll
painting.
Yeah, for
include
sure.
that
Yeah.
in the YouTube video as the introduction to it.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. All
Thanks,
right.
John. Thanks,
Thank you,
John.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks
everybody.
so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you very
everybody.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. See you on
Take care.
Facebook.
Thank you.